The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Coming up, New York City has paid over $500 million to cover lawsuits brought by those who claim to be injured. But who's really footing the bill? And should Albany make changes to our judicial system? Also, achieving the American dream may not be as far away as you think, as we discuss the much-anticipated DREAM Act. We have a lot to get to, so stay right here, because today's verdict starts right now. Welcome to today's verdict, the show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney for the next 30 minutes, David Lesch. New York City taxpayers have paid over $500 million annually in payouts for tort-related cases. A tort case is an action whereby a claim is made that a person's behavior has unfairly caused someone else to suffer loss or harm. Some argue that the rise in the amount and cost in payouts that the state hands out directly affects the rise in our taxes. But is this true? In Albany, lawmakers and advocacy organizations like the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York are calling for tort law reform that could save the state and taxpayers $100 million each year. One such reform calls for a capping of pain and suffering damages at $250,000. The Lawsuit Reform Alliance is committed to changing New York's burdensome and expensive legal system to stimulate jobs growth and energize our economy. And today's verdict is ready to get to the heart of the matter. Joining us in studio to tell us more about the Lawsuit Reform Alliance is Tom Stebbins, the Executive Director of the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Mr. Stebbins, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
So are we getting rid of all lawsuits or some lawsuits? Or
No, we're trying to just get rid of the bad lawsuits, because bad lawsuits cost, as you said, they cost the city of New York, they paid $730 million last year, 30% increase from the year before, and the highest they've ever paid. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimates that we spend about $4.3 billion in unnecessary litigation in the state of New York.
all right, so now who would you blame, by the way, for this rise in litigation that's causing so much headache? Is it the attorneys? Is it the system? Is it the litigants?
Well, we're one of the most litigious states in the most litigious country in the world. So obviously there's partly a cultural thing there, but there's a lot of laws, a lot of state laws that enable these bad lawsuits. And New York has them in spades. And part of the reason that we have so many bad laws is because we have, frankly, a huge influence of the trial bar in Albany. They were the third largest contributor in 2011, and over 20% of our legislators are practicing trial attorneys.
You know, we've had the trial lawyers here. We actually had the president on the show, and I'm sure she would argue that lawsuits are necessary to maintain a good society,
Absolutely.
to keep wrongdoers at bay and to make sure that products are safe.
Sure.
What do you say to somebody who says, well, if you do away with the lawsuits, you cap the damages, you're going to have a lot more problems than you think you have now?
Sure. Well, they're good lawsuits, and we're not trying to get rid of all lawsuits. We're really just trying to raise the bar to get rid of the bad ones, because, and people can go to our website, we cover crazy lawsuits all the time. When I started, I thought, can we cover a crazy lawsuit in New York every week? We do about 4 or 5. So people can go to LRANY.org. They can sign up for our newsletter. It comes weekly. And sometimes the things are funny. I mean, sometimes there's humorous things. Sometimes there's very serious things, because a lot of times these cases actually get paid out, even when they're frankly not very good cases.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that your organization would like to do to change the system as it exists today. What would you want to change?
Well, one of the first things is the issue of trespasser responsibility. Right now in the state of New York, somebody can break into your home and sue you for their injuries. That's something I think we need to change, because New York is one of the only places where that exists. Another issue that we work on is something called the Scaffold Law, or Labor Law 240. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with scaffolds, it just has to do with elevation. And so that if a worker shows up onto a job site and is injured, it's the employee's fault almost no matter what, if they're injured in a gravity-related accident. And that's a problem, because even if the worker is intoxicated, even if the worker disobeyed some safety protocols or something like that, it's still the employer's fault. And that's why in New York, we pay over 300% more in insurance rates for construction activities. And in New York City, boy, it's even more.
Now, some would argue, though, that the insurance rates are really higher only because of mismanagement that goes on within the insurance company itself. Or they could argue that the salaries are so high for the executives and they're not passing on the savings to the to the consumer. How do you argue that?
If that was true, why would the rates be so much lower in Ohio or in Pennsylvania or in New Jersey? Most of these insurance companies, they're multinationals. They're national companies. They do business in New Jersey. They do business in Connecticut. And yet in New York, they charge 300 up to 1,200% more to practice in New York and to insure people in New York. And because of that, you have a lot of insurers that have actually pulled out of the market. And in a less competitive market, you're going to have less punishment, really, by the consumer for mismanagement.
Now, with respect to the City of New York, I can understand, because the City of New York is really self-insured. The taxpayers really foot the bill.
Yes.
But when you're talking about insurance companies, the insurance companies are in the business to make a profit. I don't see too many insurance companies going out of business. I think Geico's still around, Allstate's still here.
Sure.
State Farm, American Transit, they're all still here.
But because of something, for example, like the Scaffold Law, we only have about 4 or 5 insurers that will write construction insurance in the state of New York. And because of that, we have a less competitive market. There are insurers out there that just won't write in New York because of this law. If we can reform that law or repeal that law, we can add competition to the system, we can make it more competitive, and therefore people will get better rates, and the companies that are mismanaged, well, they don't get customers.
All right, well, I play devil's advocate. That's what I do. All right, so
I appreciate
what do you say to the workers who work on the scaffolds and are up on the buildings probably have one of the more dangerous jobs in all of the city? Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So I think the argument being made is, well, if they're going to have this type of job and they're going to risk their lives in such a way, we want to go the extra mile to make sure that if they do get hurt, that they're compensated. What's your
Well, if
argument?
they do get hurt, they should get compensated. But if they are negligent and they are partially responsible for their injury, that should come out in court. Right now, the Scaffold Law is an absolute liability standard, so the the employer is always responsible.
And there are no exceptions?
100%. There are a few exceptions. There is something called the sole proximate cause, where, for example, we had a case where somebody sued FedEx. They jumped off a building. They jumped. And they sued FedEx because they jumped off a building. Now, fortunately, the court said that sole proximate cause, it was the employer could have done nothing to protect from somebody physically jumping off the building. But only in New York would that even be considered a case. I mean, here a man jumped off a building, and now FedEx has to go to court. Now everybody has to go to court. And he jumped. He admitted in court that he jumped, and then he's going to sue FedEx?
Well,
I don't understand.
I think it also kind of gets back to the trespasser liability issue, where you said a homeowner is responsible if somebody's trying to break in, and I know that sounds ludicrous. Someone's trying to break into my home.
Ludicrous, David.
But what would you say to the person who says, "Well, we want people to maintain good roofs and houses, and
so people can break into them"?
But are there ever instances where the person who's breaking in is not entitled to recover, or in your experience you see that they generally have been successful? Well, it doesn't seem to me that a jury would give money to somebody who's trying to break into a house.
Sure. I mean, and a lot of times what you have too is it's not just necessarily about houses. And I know this is the Bronx, but for example, if you have a snowmobiler who goes snowmobiling and trespasses on a farmer's property and say hits a barbed wire, their skids hit the barbed wire and they get injured. Now, that's why we have the Farm Bureau actually part of our organization. That's one of the laws that they're very concerned about. If that happens, they can then sue the farmer. Now, the farmer can't really take down the barbed wire. They have cows in there, but yet they can still sue. And the snowmobilers support us on that.
I can argue with you all day on this.
I welcome it.
But we have to take a quick break. Coming up, we'll discuss the DREAM Act and what it means to our society today. We'll be right back.
This is so cool, Dad. This is so cool, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
For you. Hey, Mom.
You know, girls, I used to cheer back in my day. Ready? Okay! Go team!
That was amazing, amazing, amazing.
Mom. That was amazing.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
Welcome back. I'm your host, David Lesch. We at Today's Verdict want to hear from you. So send us your questions, comments, or show ideas to David Lesch at BronxNet.org, or post a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/today'sverdict. Over 3 million students graduate from U.S. high schools each year. We like to think that most young adults do get the opportunity to live out their American dream. But is this really the case? What of the 65,000 who don't get the opportunity because of their immigration status? Despite living most of their lives in our country, thousands of students argue that the American dream is not theirs to achieve. The DREAM Act is bipartisan legislation that can help these students overcome their immigration obstacle and hopefully go on to college. The legal complexities of the DREAM Act can seem frightening and at times almost incomprehensible, but there is help. One New York law firm is offering pro bono work for those who qualify under the new DREAM Act. Joining us today to talk more about it is Managing Attorney Wanda Molina of Kim & Bay PC. Wanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the DREAM Act. What is it?
The DREAM Act, first and foremost, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for all those young adults who came here during their childhood years with their parents who were undocumented, and for many who didn't really know they were undocumented until either they went to high school, decided they wanted to get a driver's license and they needed a social security number, or for many when they applied for college and when they did not have those documents that they needed.
Well, how does it work today? Without the DREAM Act, I'm 14, 15 years old, I'm not legal, my family's not legal. What's my future like?
Well, you're subject to removal at this point.
Okay.
And you're forced to live pretty much underground, which I've seen a lot occur. You're forced to live a life like walking on eggshells continuously. And with the DREAM Act, what it does is allows these students to have a reprieve from that fear. That's number one. Number two is it also helps these students also realize that they will have a benefit, at least for 2 years, because it will be a deferred type of action, for 2 years to apply for work authorization, to obtain a social security number, okay, and to also be recognized to some degree as I'm here legit.
All right, well, listen, as you know, I play devil's advocate here.
Absolutely.
So I have to do it. So what do you say to the people who watch the show and say, hey, wait a second, their parents weren't paying taxes. Some of these students have been working after school. They haven't been paying taxes. Why give them this opportunity when the rest of us have been paying our taxes? What would you say to somebody who says that?
I would respond to that by saying and it's been my experience, and I'm only speaking from my experience, that the bulk of these youngsters, or young adults, that have been working double time and their parents have been working here, they have been contributing to the society. They have been. And I don't subscribe to the notion that they are taken away from those that are here. Because the bulk of undocumented that are here, I would be forceful to say is that they pay their dues here, okay? They work jobs that your average citizen does not want to work. They undergo a lot of abusive treatment as well. So to say that they're taken away or to say that they shouldn't have that opportunity, I just don't think it's inhumane. And if we talk about America, and America was built on immigrants.
Absolutely.
Okay, that argument, I take issue with very strongly.
That's what I like. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's say that we're allowing more and more young people to be able to get into school and to start to move on to the next level. Does this in any way impact on the ability for the rest of society to get jobs and to be able to move into the workforce themselves? I mean, the more people who are looking for jobs, the harder it is for somebody else to get a job. What would you say to that proposition?
My first response to that would be it's not the students' fault. We have an economic, worldwide issue in terms of economics, okay? I would tell you, though, that my response would be that these students that are undocumented, that you allow them to have deferred action, I think it would be a booming investment for the United States, okay? Because the bulk of these young adults have been here since they were babies. They don't know anything about their homeland. They're pretty much American. They really are.
And they're not even allowed to go back home now, because if they went back home, they couldn't come back.
Yes, a sense of detachment.
Yeah.
All they know is being here in the United States, in America. They speak the language, okay? They know the culture, okay? And they're willing, and I would also say, from my observation, the ones that I've really dealt with on a day-to-day basis, they are so conscientious. I mean, they work 2 jobs.
Well, let me ask you a question. Where do you make the cutoff, though? At what point, in terms of age, do you allow someone to be able to come in under the DREAM Act, and where do you say, I'm sorry, your age is not going to help you?
The provisions under the DREAM Act are pretty vigorous, also, and I just want to mention that there are 4 elements that need to be met. The child, I mean, the young adult has to enter the United States prior to the age of 15. Okay, they have to be living or have been residing in the United States consecutively as of June 15th. They have to be either enrolled in a high school, have a GED, or anticipate entering into the military.
Okay.
Okay, and they have to have a good moral character.
By the way, you have incredible moral character, so why don't you tell me how you got involved in this entire situation?
Well, it's in my core. I was born and raised in Spanish Harlem. So that in itself, I did a lot of grassroots activities.
And you're doing a lot of pro bono work, it looks like.
Yes, I do.
Tell us about it.
Yes, I do. I'm very fortunate to work with a firm that really subscribes to the same feelings that I have about community. Kim and Bay is a husband and wife team firm. They're from Korea. They themselves were immigrants at one point in time, and also experienced the challenges of what it was to navigate the whole immigration process. So when the DREAM Act came along and I was reading up on it, I took a course just to get upgraded on my immigration skills.
Absolutely.
I came and I spoke with them, and they indicated, well, there's something we need to do. And we need to do it for your community. I said, I'll take it. Absolutely, I'll take it. So they are just very much, they have a wonderful heart, and they decided, well, let's take at least, I know that's a lot of work. They asked me the amount of work, and it is a lot of work. Preparing the documentation is quite rigorous. Because you have to provide, it's not just the application itself, it's preparing it. To actually establish that someone has been here in the United States for 5 consecutive years can be kind of
Sure, when they're
difficult.
not documented, and
Exactly.
just to show that they even existed.
Exactly.
How do you do that?
I sit down, I do a lot of brainstorming, a lot of creativity. We can do that by ways of school records, medical records. I have one youngster who was involved, played baseball, was very good in baseball, so every year was in a league. I was able to track that down.
Sounds like, well, give me a good success story. Give me a good one.
Well, a good one is that this person basically was high school.
Okay.
A high school student, came very poor, very, very poor family. Was actually working 2 jobs, not only to work to pay for school, his school supplies, he also helped his mom. The application was actually accepted, and he's right now applying for work authorization so he could do it legally at this point.
That's terrific.
And the beautiful thing about it is, it's just the feeling when I see them, the look on their face. It's so personally rewarding. It really is, to see someone that you've helped. I've done a lot of work in a lot of different fields, but actually having someone reach a level which they feel there's some freedom. It's awesome.
Well, look, you're doing a lot of good for the community, and I want you to know I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
We take a quick break. Coming up, we'll talk about the possibility of policy change now that the 2012 presidential election is upon us. We'll be right back.
How's it going?
Sir, are you okay?
What? Oh, this? It's probably nothing. I'm sure it'll go away.
Go away? But, sir, that can't be good.
No, it's cool. Really.
Do you want a napkin or something?
Everything's fine. Thanks.
You wouldn't ignore this. So why ignore the signs of a stroke? At the first warning signs, call 911 immediately. Because time lost is brain lost.
I remember how much you said you liked wine.
Oh.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
I'm your host, David Lesch. We at Today's Verdict want to hear from you, so send us your questions, comments, or show ideas to David Lesch at BronxNet.org, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Today's Verdict. It's election time. Time to get out to vote. Such a tough decision, but joining us on today's show is Tom Stebbins, Executive Director of the Lawsuit Reform Alliance, and Managing Attorney Wanda Molina of Kim and Bay, PC, and I'm about to ask each of them about the possible change in our nation's administration and policies now that the election is less than a month away. And let's start with Tom, who I'm sure has a couple of opinions as to where you think this nation should be going in terms of personal responsibility. Am I
Sure.
correct?
Well, obviously we advocate for personal responsibility, but for us, you know, a lot of the issues that we work on are at the state level. And a lot of people, they'll know the president, they'll know their congressman, but they might not know their senator or assemblyman. And they should know that some of the most important decisions that are being made for our state are really made by those legislators.
And I would assume when we're talking about tort reform, might be a little bit to the advantage of those who are advocating to be on the side of the Republican Party. Would that be accurate? Or
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. No? You know, as we talked before the show, I built wind farms and worked for PBS, so I think my liberal cred is pretty strong.
But look what Mitt Romney wants to do to PBS. So
that's true. Sure. He wants to. Yeah. So you know, as I said, he and I might not see eye to eye on those sorts of things. So for us, you know, we don't see it as a left issue or a right issue. It's really a common sense issue.
All right. Let's talk immigration. Obviously, it's a big issue for both candidates.
Yes, it is.
Is there any particular candidate you think might be better to promote the cause of the DREAM Act?
The way I feel is that both candidates, I think, realize the importance of providing for that population. So I heard the incumbent indicate that he's not going to make any monumental changes.
Okay.
And that indicates to me that he realizes the importance of the DREAM Act. President Obama, I think, will definitely fortify it. I'm looking forward to it being a law, not a policy, because the DREAM Act, which is a deferred action, it really is a change in immigration policy that the president provided for Homeland Security. It's not law. So I'm hoping that if President Obama wins, that he will make it into law. And I'm hopeful that if it's not President Obama, that Mitt Romney will understand the importance and actually continue the deferred action program in some format. Because if he doesn't, then we will be losing out on a huge population that is our future. And there's a lot to be said about those young adults that are acquiring an education here.
Well, speaking of Mitt Romney and speaking of our future, certainly our corporations also would like some type of future, and in terms of their abilities to be able to function. What, if anything, would Romney advocate with respect to lawsuits and corporations? Would he be obviously looking to limit some of the exposure?
Gosh, it's hard for me to say. Really, we focus just on the state issues, and we've seen this governor be very strong in terms of our issues, in terms of economic development and jobs and those sorts of things. At the national level, we mostly just
they always talk about caps and tort reform, and as I alluded to earlier, they talk about personal responsibility. It always seems to be. It doesn't seem to be something that either candidate has been necessarily talking about, stepping in terms of the trail, but I'm sure Mitt Romney would probably have a position somewhere along the other.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, really, I know this was part of the discussion during the Affordable Care Act, and when that was under discussion, having caps on damages, having stronger evidentiary standards, that was all part of the discussion. But just as the trial bar is strong in Albany, they're equally strong in Washington, D.C., so that never made it into the Affordable Care Act.
All right, well, immigration obviously is something that we're going to be discussing for a long period of time. Where do you think this country is heading in terms of the immigration issue? Do you feel that there seems to be an undercurrent of sympathy, or is there a backlash? If you had to put your pulse on the nation right now.
I feel a movement towards a positive drive to look at immigration as something positive, not negative.
Just in New York or nationally?
Nationally. When you have educational institutions that are initiating initiatives to help under the DREAM Act nationwide, when you have students rallying, you know, going out there and just voting with signs up, when you have people in the streets talking about continuously about immigration issues, to me, that's an awakening that puts immigration on a level that will shift. And I think it's going to shift towards a positive end.
Okay, listen, I want contact information. Let's start with you, Tom.
Sure, people can go to LRANY.org, and as I said, sign up for our newsletter. Comes out once a week.
Okay, and what?
Kim and Bay.
All right.
And my email is wmolina@kimandbay.com.
Now, I want both of you to promise me that you're going to come back after the election and to discuss the issues. Is that a promise?
I'd love to, yes.
Yes?
I would love to, too.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for tonight. It's time to deliberate. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us and, of course, you for watching. Remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you would like to see on the show, email me at BronxNet.org. And until we see you again, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We will see you next time.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad. Nice.
Charles!
Nice, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
Welcome home, man.